Started recording. Welcome, Amanda, and thank you very much for joining the Positive Pants Parent Sanctuary. Bit of a mouthful. You're now going to have a chat with us for the next 20 minutes or so, and I'm just going to hand straight over to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's really lovely to come and spend time talking about my biggest passion, which is emotional response awareness. So my background is that I was quite lively at school. I didn't concentrate. I talked too much. I was quite oppositional and had a lot of shame and stigma placed on me for those behaviours because I was quite bright. I had a career in the RAF and then I came out. And when my daughter was just about 6, she was diagnosed with ADHD, and she's 32 now. So we are away on our journey. And this really sparked an interest in how those behaviours are perceived. And by the time she was in junior school, from where you are, she was also diagnosed with Asperger's, and now it's changed to autism. So to support her, I went to get a job in a local secondary school, which is our version of your junior school. And because I've been in the military and I've done lots of voluntary work, they took a chance and gave me a job. And on the first week, I was put in with the naughty class, because I was the new girl, and I walked into a DT class full of kids and fell in love. And also there was this massive light bulb moment coming from a SEN parenting point of view, which was still fairly new. She was one of the first children in Kent to get that dual diagnosis, and there's never been services for her. To being in a room with children and young people who were so completely misunderstood that it made my blood boil. So a real passion started that day, and my studies went alongside that. One of the things that gripped me the most really early on, about 25 years ago, I did a training course where we were really starting to look at the role of the amygdala. And I got really, really cross that we had this system, this emergency response system, and we could understand the physiology and the body's job of doing what it was supposed to do, but at no point was there any education being given to children and families. So it's been a long journey. It's been lots of full of bumps as a parent in the SEND community, as a practitioner working between families, health and education. I worked in education until 2011, and then I moved to the residential care sector, where I realised that it wasn't education specifically that I was furious with, it was systems in general because of my oppositional nature. So I went self-employed now 14 years ago, and I've been working in schools, in residential care settings, and working on developing this programme that teaches children the science of their bodies. And it is quite simply, we're teaching them what it says on the tin. My biggest frustration with a lot of the feeling and emotion work we do with children, certainly from a parent point of view, the biggest frustration for me was always that my daughter was given emotion faces to look at. Now, my daughter is a proud ASD, ADHD young woman, and she has probably 3 expressions, and none of them represent what are shown on an emoji face. So that was pretty much all they threw at her, was happy faces, sad faces, and it just didn't make sense to her. She's a very, very intelligent young woman, and it just didn't make sense. However, her understanding what her body was doing did make sense to her. So we started the journey of writing a set of children's books, and I'm going to talk you through some of them. I'm on the phone, so I don't have slides, but I'm going to go through parts of the book and teach you in a very simple and short period of time what it is that I share with the children. So the first story is Tam's Journey, the Beginning. It's about a little boy called Tam who runs off into the wood because he's really, really quite cross. He runs into a tree and falls over, and he is devastated. He feels cross. He doesn't know why. He doesn't understand why. He can't verbalise what it is that's the matter, and the adults are telling him to calm down, which adds another layer of stress, because if he knew how to calm down, he would be able to do it in the first place, and he can't. So he meets a lovely sloth called Hetty, and she sits with him and soothes him. And she explains that actually, as part of evolution, we were the amygdala was a very important part of our safety and survival system. So, in terms of evolution, we need to have safety to survive. And if we are not resting, reproducing, and refueling, we're not safe enough to then be able to evolve and create the next generation so that the species is in this continual cycle of survival. Um, the way we do that is we absorb information from our environment to understand if we feel safe. And this is where the senses come in. So she teaches him about his senses. I don't go into the additional ones, I stick to the 5. This book is used from young children all the way through to adults. And the whole point of this is to keep it as simple as possible. We give too many labels and names to things as it is, and children need to understand the very basics. So we just stick to the 5 senses that pass information into the brain and forces our body into a fight, flight, and freeze response. Again, I don't go into fawn or collapse or any of those other things. This is keeping it a very simple introduction to the nervous system. So, getting them to understand that having these responses is completely normal for our nervous system, okay? And it has impacts. What isn't normal is the amount of information we take in nowadays versus what we needed to take in as cavemen. So we look at that a little bit and start to look at some of the things that might cause that response, not understanding what's being said, loud noises, shouting, friendships, people being unkind, homework, and for the autistic parents, I I had all the battles with homework, so it wasn't really a thing in our house because it didn't really happen. So what she teaches him is that feelings are okay, feelings are absolutely normal, and they are part of the reasons that we have evolved to be where we are. Okay. So there's a lot of science that goes into these books, but you wouldn't necessarily recognise it as the story goes on. The next book then looks at how that information is transferred into the body, because he goes back to Hetty and he said, I understand, I'm not feeling quite so stressed when I'm not calm. But now I get a red face, my legs feel shaky. So then she sits with him and she teaches him the science of the physiology of the response, which is that when we need to fight and flight, we need extra blood on the outside of our body so that we've got strong arms and strong legs to defend ourselves. We don't have any extra blood in our body, so we have to borrow some. And the physiological process is that all our internal organs that have any muscle base change the way they work ever so slightly, and then that allows more blood to be pumped into the muscles and oxygenated by breathing fast and the heart racing fast. The rest of the organs change how they work in terms of they might relax or they might tense. So a tightness in the throat or the chest, or an upset stomach, or needing a wee, or a tightness in the tummy, or pains in the side, or needing the toilet, feeling sick, having a fuzzy head, getting hot, having pains, having butterflies. For children, they're sensations that they don't recognise. When they understand it's because blood's moving from one part of the body to the other, it can really take away a lot of the fear from the stress response. Certainly, I've worked with lots of children who don't like to go to school because they feel sick. Once they understand that they feel sick because their stomach has decided it doesn't need to work in the same way, then the anxiety or the fear that they have is purely about going to school, it's not additionally about feeling sick and going to school. Because what we're seeing more and more is that because children don't understand, they get told that they've got anxiety or school-based anxiety. No one's sitting and explaining to them what your body's doing is A, B, and C, and that is why you have these sensations here. And it can be a really, really simple conversation. So this next book really goes into, I don't know if that's showing up. Not really. Yeah, there. This next book's really going into looking at the body parts and the part they play in how we feel the response. So, okay, the next book is She's Feeling Great. He's got a new teacher. He's shared all this information with her. They have a positive relationship, but she's starting to talk about strategies, which again, he doesn't understand what they are. We use words strategy and intervention in school. The kids have no idea what that means. So this just explains that how many neurons that the brain has. So it introduces the idea that all these brain cells are what makes all this happen, and that sometimes they join together and make patterns. And sometimes those patterns are helpful, sometimes they're really not helpful. But choosing to do something, and this is where we come into a lot of the strategies schools use, anything sensory that causes any soothing of the nervous system is really, really helpful. But what schools don't do is teach the physiology of why they are helpful. And that sort of comes me to the big thing, and that's the why. Children will say mum and dad and yes and no, and then they will want to know why. They want to know why everything early on, and it's how they make sense of their development, it's how they make sense of all their growth. We don't teach children why they have emotional responses, and bringing awareness to what is happening in our body biologically can take the pressure off of a young person and a child and a family and a grandparent to such a length that it can make a massive difference to their lives. A child who has been shamed and stigmatized because of the way they respond to their responses really needs to understand that their body is doing its job. They do have some power how they can help it do its job in healthier ways, and sometimes they won't because they're children and their brains aren't fully developed yet, so the thinking part of the brain hasn't yet come online. And when I do training in schools, and some schools use this as a whole school approach, they have adapted. So I've got a secondary school that I work with, and they have adapted their entire approach. So then they say to the children, they don't say what's wrong, what's the matter, why are you behaving like this. What they say is, what is your body telling you and how can we help? So they've completely flipped it. So we don't have the charts, we don't have all the happy faces, we don't have all of those things, which many children, some children will really like those. But again, we're putting our interpretation and our perception onto someone else's response. So if I think my happy face looks like that, that's just my happy face. That's not necessarily Claire's happy face. That might look like something completely different. And again, we've standardized emotional response to such a point that so many children now, it doesn't make sense to them and they can't access them, and they know more and they can see more things happening. But all the time, we're not allowing them to understand what's happening in their bodies. We're allowing the labeling of a natural physiological response to be called stress, anxiety, behaviour, and it all adds that layer of shame, like Andy was saying, that layer of shame to the responses, where actually as a family the discussion can be, right, what's your body doing, what's it telling you, where can we put a soother in place? Sometimes it's about letting it happen and then soothing backwards to take the shame out of it. And we're a long way off of this being embedded in systems, but we have sold a lot of books. We do a lot of work in schools. We have all these lovely plushies, which the kids like. Claire's looking at me and looking at the clock, but I'm going to carry on for a minute. So we have hearts and lungs and brains and tummies and,
You got
you
another
know,
five
these.
minutes, Amanda. You're fine.
All right. So we actually had a little 4-year-old. I watched his nan break down in tears because he'd been selected mute at school. And well, I don't like the word selective, it's not selective, but he'd been mute at school and he really couldn't get anyone to, he couldn't verbalise his feelings. So I sat with him and read him the first book, and 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 he got it, and he picked this up. His nan bought him all five. He picked this up and he said to his nan, "This is where I feel." So he's on the autistic spectrum. He didn't have the language to use complex sentences. His cognitive, um, thinking abilities isn't online yet, but he knew that it was in his stomach, and that's been life changing for him. They've brought this into the school. They've had these conversations, and he even talked in front of me, which he'd never done before. So we all sat there grizzling, but it was a really lovely moment. And not all children are going to need this specifically, but I think all children do need to know the physiology of how their body works and why it responds in the way that it works. Not just children. When I do this training with the adults, most of them don't know the science and the history of the evolution and why our nervous system does what it does, why it does what it does, how it does it, and how moving into, basically, we've gone from using it as a real threat when we're in a life-threatening situation to now we use it for just about anything, and our sensory input has gone from enough to keep us safe to overwhelming, no matter where you are in terms of neurodiversity. We are all chronically overwhelmed and we're all processing too much information all of the time because we don't live simply, and society doesn't allow us to live simply, so it's not something that we can always change. A lot of people are stuck in situations where you've got this chronic overload all the time, so the nervous system, it just can't keep up, and it I always say to the kids, it's like your nosy friend that has to be involved with everything and keeps poking their nose in all the time. So you go from responding because you don't feel safe to responding because you've walked into a class and someone looks at you. And for some young people I work with, that can mean the tables and chairs go over, they run out, they get put in a quiet space away from everybody else where they have to challenge, they have to battle the shame of being segregated, but also the calm of being removed from that noise. And it's really tricky, because it then becomes a pattern of behaviour, and then it's little Johnny always gets sent out of that lesson because no one's actually looking at the fact that someone looks at him funny every time he goes in. They're only looking at the behaviour, which is what I see time and time again. So for me, it's vital that one family at a time, one conversation at a time, one webinar at a time, we keep having these conversations where we bring what our body is doing to the centre of emotional response awareness, so that we really change the narrative in how we approach these things.
Thank you. That's amazing. Really great insight, and I will fully endorse the books and the accompaniments that come with it. I've got them all on my shelf, and depending which children I'm working with, I'll often take them with me. We've got a sloth there.
Yeah.
So yeah, really great resources to use with young people. So thank you very much for that. What I'm going to do just very quickly before we stop recording, I'm just going to share my screen again just to tell people about what we've got at Positive Pants, and then we'll stop recording, and then we can do the Q&A where you can all, if you want to, or if you're able to, put your cameras on, because I know we've had some technical issues tonight. But just for the moment, If you haven't already seen these are for slightly younger children, I would say, but you know, positive affirmations are for everybody. So we have our positive mindset cards at Positive Pants. And this isn't me selling to you, because we actually have a PDF that you can download there, which is wellbeing.positivepants.co.uk/gift. And that is a free resource with 5 of the cards, and each of the cards has an activity on the back. So they're all creative wellbeing linked activities that you can use with your child. So if you want to try them out, please download that as my free gift for you. And if you would like to attend our next webinar live or in person, or if you want to just watch the recording, just there's the save the date there. Next one is Tuesday, the 7th of July. And it'll be a nice drop-in session for people to ask questions and get some personalised support. And let me just click here. And then we also have our online course. So if you're a parent, and this is particularly aimed again at primary school age children, but if you would like to try some of the techniques that I regularly use in my sessions, the more sort of, you know, the more popular ones that sort of you tend to use again and again, I call it little Blue Peter course, because they're little 15-minute videos where you can literally watch it yourself. You don't need to buy loads of extra stuff in to do it. And you can sit with your child and do it together. Key part of that is our awareness of our bodies and of everything I do, as does Amanda, in different ways. And there's all of our handles there. Right, I am now going to stop the recording. And thank you again, Amanda. Actually, before we stop the recording, do you want to just say where people can find you, and if they want to know more about you, social media handles, your website?
Yeah, so I'm just about to launch a new website in a couple of weeks, but it's www.insideout.osyp .co.uk, and but I'm Amanda Peddle and Jeffery on Facebook and LinkedIn, and with Tam's Journey on Instagram and TikTok. If you just put in Amanda Peddle, it will take you to all of them.
I was just going to say, what we'll do is, if you ping me the links, we'll put them in the email that goes out to people that have
Okay.
that have this, so that they've got it to hand and they can click on it, just to make everyone's life a little bit easier.
And I just want to add, you know, everything that Claire does, anything we do like that, creativity soothes the nervous system, and it also stops the brain from ruminating. So to be able to link that to soothing the body, which I know Claire does as well, but you know, it is really important that we start to recognise that we're intentionally choosing an activity that is going to break the neural patterns. And you know, I know some of it sounds sciencey, but the kids really get it. They do really get it. They're wiser than we think they are sometimes. And you know, once they know it, it's like magic for them, because you know, they'll be calling you out, which is not a bad thing.
We like being challenged by our children, don't we?
We do.
Right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for your time, Amanda, and your
No,
friendship and
always.
support over the years. But thank you, and I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you very much.